here's why Moldova is one of the safest countries I've ever been to. So, welcome back to the Traveling Report, and today I'm going to talk to you about how Moldova is one of the safest countries I've been to, and why you may want to have some assets here or include it in your portfolio of countries that you are looking at. So, I recently, just maybe 5 minutes ago, saw 3 members of parliament just randomly walking in this park in central Chisinau. While that may not seem weird to certain countries, certainly if I saw a senator walking around in the United States without armed security, I'd feel fairly weirded out, right? Where is your motorcade? Where is your protection? However, in countries like Moldova, in countries like Georgia, in countries like Armenia, they don't need these entourage of security officers. And in fact, they actively feel like that would be a stain on their reputation. And so the great thing about Moldova, and the great thing about places like Moldova, are that these kinds of people are exactly what you're looking for in terms of safety. As sure, the citizens can be safe, but if the government is not liked by the citizens, who's to say they won't create a mutiny that will make it unsafe for you? And so, it's with this that it creates an insanely safe atmosphere. People are able to walk around in a public park. I'm not just making things up here. People are just walking around here. And of course, it is something that obviously people in developing countries don't think about much, but it's a very good indicator that it's safe in these countries and people can live their lives. And especially for families, I believe it's very important to be able to see, leadership position in action just walking around. While I think that the president of Moldova wouldn't be able to do that, Maya Sandu, I think that realistically, she doesn't have to. If all other parliamentary members are able to, it becomes very evident that it's safe. It becomes a thing of just easing the mind and making you think twice about the safety of your own home country. I grew up in the United States where we don't feel safe. It's constantly news about someone getting shot or someone getting stabbed. Since I've been here, I do not believe there has been a single report. Not a single one. Not in Bangkok, not in Tiraspol, not in Chisinau. And so it's with this that you get this insane sense of calm. I don't feel pressured recording in the middle of a public park. And it's fairly quiet here too, actually. For all intents and purposes, it's one of the most quiet parks I've been to, actually, I think, period. Maybe out in the middle of nowhere in the United States, it's quieter. But for a central park, this is very quiet. Now, it's not always quiet, especially when foot traffic picks up in the afternoon. It is a bit louder, but, people aren't here just yelling into the abyss. Most of it is traffic noise or sirens. And that's something that, is very nice. So the safety and the level in which you can operate your business, operate your industrial base and your growth base, right? And how you can create new product, create more growth, and create newer employees. I'm going to create a company soon here in Moldova. And in essence, creating a company here in Moldova is fairly simple. It takes about 3 days, I believe, and most of it can be done remotely. You can sign documents, and essentially after that, you are resident of Moldova, and after 10 years, you can get citizenship on the history and language exam. You will need to know Romanian, up to, I don't know if it's B1 or B2, I'll put it up here. You're not dealing with the same level of monitoring you would be in Berlin, or Oslo, or Zurich, or, Bern. You are dealing with a significantly lower retention of what you do with your life, how you live your life. And if you want to do something, you can, and you should. And there's less regulation actually now in developing countries like Moldova, in developing countries like Romania, than there are in places like the United States, like the UK. And while the business rankings do not yet reflect that, that is simply because access to capital is not very easy here. However, just because access to capital is not easy does not make business inherently that hard. You can raise capital through any number of ways, any number of methods. And I'm currently raising capital for my own firms. And so you have sort of this difference in mentality and how people live their lives, which creates, again, a much safer, much more enjoyable experience to living in these countries. And when you live in these countries, you sort of understand a bit more of what true safety is. You know, I was recently in Bangkok, Thailand, and, you know, Thailand is one of the most dangerous countries in the Southeast Asia region. However, I felt more safe in Bangkok than I did in most places in Western Europe. And the reason why is because, as the charts show from, you know, places like the World Economic Forums, like global Interpol databases, they don't have as much violent crime. And they don't have as much people who are trying to kill you, who are, you know, out to get you specifically. Most of the crime in Thailand is gang crime. Most of the crime in most of Asia is gang crime. And while that's not great, it's not going to hurt civilians. Gangs in Thailand are not after hurting some random tourist who has nothing to do with their business. Same in, you know, the Philippines, for example. My editor is from the Philippines. The Philippines is very different in terms of safety than the United States, than Western Europe, because it's based on family dynasty. Now, there did used to be some issues with the Philippines in terms of political things. If you believe that you don't want, you know, political issues, then actually probably don't go to the Philippines, as Filipino politics are largely family-based and based on family differences. I don't want to get too deep into Filipino politics, even though largely I understand them. And I have some family over in Manila that is Thai. I think they're still in Manila. They may not be in Manila anymore, but I digress. What you're seeing increasingly in these countries is more safety, more rule of law, more ability to live your life. And if you're looking for that, for me, the best way to do that is to go through developing countries. Now, if you enjoyed that video and that perspective, I would appreciate a like. If you really enjoyed it, feel free to share it with all your friends. And if you want to join me on this journey, feel free to subscribe. This has been the Traveling Report, and I'm off.